Welcome to church and children's story this Sabbath. I would like to tell you a story that happened in Russia a very, very long time ago. There was a elderly lady who was a widow, and she had a huge estate. She had 2,000 acres. She had a huge house. She owned about 150 milking cows. She had 50 horses, lots of servants, and she had saved a lot of money. Well, there was a war, and when the invaders came, they took her house, they took her land, they took her horses, they took her cows, they got rid of all of her servants, and the only thing that they left for her was a very small barn. The other thing that happened to her was that her son and daughter-in-law were killed, which meant that she was now responsible for her three granddaughters, her 14-year-old, the 8-year-old, and the 6-year-old. Well, in order to get food for themselves, the grandmother and the two oldest children would go out and work. And then the little 6-year-old girl would knit socks and sell the socks. There was a particular custom in this part of Russia where at the end of a meal, or every meal, the wife or mother would take the large kitchen knife and she would sharpen it on the edge of the table, which showed their faith that God would send them the next meal. This particular day, they finished lunch, and as they finished lunch, they realized that they had not been able to find work that day, so they would not have any money to buy food for their evening meal. The grandmother reassured the children that God would provide for them. The little 6-year-old said, "Grandma, do you really believe that?" And the grandma said, "Yes, why do you ask?" And the little 6-year-old said, "Because you didn't sharpen the kitchen knife." So Grandma went, she got the kitchen knife, and she started sharpening it on the edge of the table. And as she was sharpening it, she was praying in her mind. Well, after she sharpened it, the little 6-year-old asked if she could sharpen it as well. The grandmother gave it to her, and she started sharpening it, and as she sharpened it, she prayed out loud. She said, "Dear God, please send us some bread, but don't just send us a slice of bread. Please send us a whole loaf, because you know that's what we need." Well, at the end, the rest of the day, it came to supper time, and there was no bread. They went around, they started getting ready for bed, and just before bed, the grandma was really discouraged because she was sure that God was going to answer this girl's prayer, and so far it hadn't been answered. Well, right before they went to bed, there was a knock on the door, and the grandma went to go answer the door, and it was a friend of hers. And this older gentleman had walked 18 miles to come visit them that day. And as he sat down, he kind of looked at them sheepishly and he said, "You know what? I really don't know why I'm here. I just felt impressed that I needed to visit you." And then he looked at the granddaughters and he said, "I bet you can't guess what I brought you." And the littlest girl said, "I know what you brought." And the man said, "What do you think I brought you?" And she said, "You brought us bread, but it's not just a slice, it's a whole loaf." The man smiled at her and he said, "That's exactly what I brought you." And from out of his coat, he pulled a very, very, very long loaf of bread like they made in many places in the bakeries there in Russia. And he knew then why he had been sent to their home. And just like God provided for this grandmother and her granddaughters, God always provides for us when we ask him and tell him our needs. Thank you for listening.